Hi, thank you for joining us. With me is Mr. Lynn, an attorney who works with the Illinois Association of School Boards. I thought you might introduce your firm because it has a very interesting heritage, and I know it's been in existence for some 70 years.
That's correct. The name of the firm is Scariano, Himes, and Petrarca. And Judge Scariano started the firm in 1949. We just kicked off our 70th year. He came back from World War II, where he was in the OSS and the resistance in Sicily.
Huh.
Went to law school, started his firm in Chicago Heights, and moved it to Chicago thereafter. His son, Tony Scariano, was my partner, and his grandson, Tony Scariano, is in the firm now.
Well, Lynn, thanks for joining us. We'd like to talk about the topic of the Janus Supreme Court decision. And as I've read it, it's somewhat complicated in that not only is there the Supreme Court decision, there's the state of Illinois, and I guess any legal updates that have been provided to it. I thought you might just give us an introduction to it.
Well, the Supreme Court decision does affect the fair share fees paid by government employees to the unions that represent government employees. Specifically in the state of Illinois, we're governed by the Illinois Educational Labor Relations Act, and it, until this decision, permitted fair share fees to be collected by the union. Now, in order to collect those fees, the union had to bargain with the management and put into the collective bargaining agreement that fair share fee. Fee payers are not members of the union. They are members of the bargaining unit, which is much larger. So within the bargaining unit, those represented by the union, there will be a good number who are union members and pay dues, but there may be some that don't want to pay dues, and they had to pay a fee for the efforts of the union to represent them in collective bargaining and perhaps in grievances.
So, of the number of districts covering about the 1.9 million students here in Illinois, what percentage of, I guess, employees are not paying those union dues that have, what is that split?
Well, the overwhelming majority of teachers that are employed in Illinois are in bargaining units.
I see.
More and more of the support personnel have been joining bargaining units in recent years. In each individual bargaining unit, probably no more than one or two or three would be fee payers. The rest would be union members.
I see. Now, does it apply to both certified and non-certified staff?
It does.
Okay.
It does. If you are a public employee, then this decision would apply to you, and the decision says you no longer have to pay that fee. And you should not have to pay that fee because the organization to whom you're giving the money may be espousing things that you don't agree with, and it's your free speech right not to associate.
You know, I've had people come up to me and ask for clarification of how does this apply to the right to work states, and how does that impact that Janus decision?
Well, in the right to work states, by statute, they say you can't have a closed shop, an agency shop where you have to join the union in order to get the job. And it affects that in the public sector in those states. Illinois is not a right to work state. And so they can have agency fee agreements in the private sector. But in the public sector, they've carved out that if you don't want to be a union member, your union can agree with your employer to collect a fair share fee up until the Janus decision.
I see.
Now we cannot collect the fee at all, and should not.
So, all good decisions need to be enforced. So, how does that Janus decision get enforced to the average employee who finds it being not so easy to be protected under the Janus Supreme Court decision?
Well, that's an interesting question because the employer is actually a third party in this situation. The fee payer and the union have a relationship, and we by contract had to withhold that money, but we don't have a duty and probably should not make a mass education effort to tell union members, by the way, you're a fee payer and you don't have to pay. That's between them. There are right-wing right-to-work organizations that have mobilized and are trying to contact these employees to tell them of their rights. But in general, that's a union employee thing, and we try to stay out of the business.
Yeah, I would think there's certain areas of the state and the country where the union rule is a little stronger, a little more supportive
Oh, yes.
than other areas.
Yes. The unions in Illinois have done a very, very good job of organizing and a very, very good job of collective bargaining. The major ones are the Illinois Education Association and Illinois Federation of Teachers. And they represent the overwhelming majority of unionized teachers in the state. In fact, in Chicago, it's an Illinois Federation of Teachers, local.
Do you have much personal representation of people? Or are there many suits that you're jumping in trying to help the employee?
We have stayed out of this as much as we can. Right now, all we are is a third party collecting the money.
I see.
Where this is going to come to pass and play out in the future is if current union members decide, hey, I can save some money, I can drop out of the union, and I don't have to pay, and I still get represented by the union. So the union's concern is that they will lose active union members, and as they refer to freeloaders, those that
Right, the freeloaders, yeah.
So far, they haven't found that to be the case. But I've been told that in Wisconsin and in Indiana, it was the second year when people started opting out. They changed their state statutes before the Janus decision. So here in Illinois, the concern is for the unions that they may lose some current members, but I think their biggest concern is their access to new employees. Most unions have an orientation provision in the collective bargaining agreement that gives them a shot at new employees for a certain amount of time, paid time. But if these right-to-work groups are emailing and contacting the new employee at the same time, saying, you don't have to join, you get the benefit. But now, as you march further down the road, the next thing for the union is, well, if we don't get the revenue, why do they get to pay for free bride? Right. Maybe we shouldn't have to represent anyone but union dues-paying members and not everyone in the bargaining unit.
I see. You know, there's another, I would call it somewhat related topic that deals with teacher shortages throughout the state. So my question is, how does the Janus decision impact, either helpful or not so helpful, the issue of teacher shortages that the state's experiencing right now?
I don't think that decision will have any impact at all. I think that people are going to choose to be teachers for very special reasons. They're definitely never going to get rich doing the job. It's definitely a difficult job that has changed over and over, and few of us could be successful teachers. And a really good teacher is a really good teacher by their own desire. You can't make them a bad teacher. And people that don't want to teach don't stay in there very long. Right.
Well, the Janus decision has really been something that's been, I guess, complicated because it hasn't been properly explained, and a misinformation just kind of continues on. If you're interested in learning a lot more detail about the Janus decision, would you be available to speak with school boards?
Be happy to. I've been doing this for 39 years.
Well, I think you know it by now. I think you've probably heard every question there's been given.
Thank you.
Well, I just want to thank you for coming, and please feel free to reach out and contact Lynn Himes. Wealth of information, and I just appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much. Thank you.
There is one issue we didn't cover that I think you might want to do.
Okay, and what's that?
When we move down the continuum and they no longer represent fee payers or free riders and only ones in the union, then that means that if you're in the union, you have a grievance, you get represented. If you're not in the union, you're SOL, you're out on your own. You don't get to go through the grievance procedure. You don't get the due process.
Okay.
Now, if employers were enlightened, that's when they take care of those people. But since the 50s up till now, every chance the employer's gotten, they've messed it up. That's why we have the Fair Labor Standards Act, we have OSHA. But employers didn't do the right things. Okay.
You know, one of the other important topics is when you're in that bargaining unit, I'm trying to think how to ask that. Say that again.
You mentioned that one of the topics in the future is the union pushing to only represent those union members and not everyone in the bargaining unit.
Right, right. You know, another really important topic is representation, whether you're in that bargaining unit or out. And how does that work?
Well, currently, the union has to represent everyone in the bargaining unit, all teachers,
Everybody.
you know, all bus drivers, whoever's been designated to be in that unit. But if they get to a point where only a percentage of the bargaining unit members are dues paying union members, the union would push to say, well, we only represent the dues payers in collective bargaining. We only represent the dues payers in discipline and grievance matters and not the free riders.
I see.
So they would be on their own. Now, since probably the 1950s, management has messed it up every chance they got. That's why we have OSHA, that's why we have Fair Labor Standards,
Yeah.
that's why we have the Equal Pay Act, because management wasn't doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So what they should do is they should treat the fee payers in that situation like they treat confidential employees who are not in the bargaining unit and take care of them, give them appropriate raises, appropriate working conditions. Sadly, my fear is that what will happen is they'll discipline or dismiss someone as a fee payer without proper due process and drive all the other ones into the arms of the union.
Yeah.
See, that's why you need to be in the union.
That's the fear factor, the intimidation factor is real. Is real. Well, thank you. I already did the ending, so that
Good.
we don't have to splice it. It's great. That's very complicated.
It's a fun thing. It really is.
You know,
Mary and
I
were
know
talking
it's
about
simple, but you know, when you hear it for the first time, you know, it seems
Well, the terms are
complicated.
different. It's not
Yeah.
something you use in everyday life.
Right.
I was amazed at our administrators didn't know the difference between the bargaining unit, the union members,
Yeah.
and the fee payers.
Yeah, yeah, very clear. Very clear. Thank you.